Thank you, Bonnie, for coming to Tokyo and to Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I wish to introduce Madam Bonnie Glaser in the first place. She is my older friend, best friend, and she is the most known expert of Taiwan and China. She visited China recently twice, and Taiwan twice, yes. And this is a great opportunity to hear her opinion and her take on the actual situation in Taiwan and in China. And we wish to know very much what would be the US government's stance towards China and Taiwan today. So thank you very much for coming, Bonnie.
Thank you so much for having me, Kanehara-san. It's wonderful to see you again.
Great. Maybe shall we start our discussion?
Start.
Yeah. We had the elections in Taiwan, and the Li Ching-da won the leader's place, and he's replacing Tsai Ing-wen. And what your take on these new elections, result of that?
Well, Li Ching-da had two people who were running against him. And as a result, the vote was split. Only 40% of the voters voted for Li Ching-da. And this compares with the prior election where Tsai Ing-wen won 56% of the vote. And of course, that was the second time that she had won the election, and both times she had a very significant majority. So Li faces, I think, a bit of a challenge because he doesn't have a very strong political mandate, but even more because the legislative yuan is now divided. For the last 8 years, Tsai Ing-wen had a legislature that was dominated by her own party.
That's right.
And that made it easier for her to get legislation passed. When I was just in Taiwan this past week, and I met with legislators from all of the three main parties, and they are all talking about how to work together. But I think that will be challenging. The Taiwan People's Party under Ko Wen-je and the KMT they're pushing for legislative reform. They want to bring the president to the legislative yuan to speak and maybe even answer questions. I think this will never happen. But they see opportunities to try to get their own agendas passed and their own bills. And so this will be, I think, far more difficult for Li Ching-da than it was for Tsai. Secondly, I think that Li understands that in 4 years, he will have to run for re-election again. And so he remains party chair. And he has to have a plan to win back the support from the youth. A large chunk of the youth voted for Ko Wen-je, 26.5%, which is very significant. And so I think he's already thinking about how to bring back the youth and how to cultivate new talent within the DPP. He's very keen to continue the policies, and many of the policies that Tsai Ing-wen started. Defense reform being one of them, strengthening Taiwan's ties with the international community. Those are very important to him, and particularly, of course, with the United States and Japan.
How can he take back the support of the youth? Because they're interested more in their jobs, prices going up, their daily lives are not much better off than before, the same. TSMC is making huge amount of money. It's not for everybody in Taiwan. And 8 years of the DPP in power, for them, it's a good days, but that did not improve their lives, daily lives. That's the reason why the votes shifted from DPP to Mr. Carr, People's Party. How can Li Ching-da take back these votes of youth in the coming years?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for him is he has to continue to grow the economy and then find ways to provide more jobs, to grow new industries in Taiwan, so they're not so dependent on just the IT sector. President Tsai has been very keen to expand, for example, defense industry, but there are also other industries that they want to expand, the machine tool industry, for example. So he has to help them to find jobs, provide, of course, childcare for young families. It's not widely known, but Taiwan actually has the lowest birth rate in the entire world.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is lower than Japan's. It is lower than China's.
Korea?
So I think it's also lower than Korea.
Oh, really? Korea is 0.87.
Serious challenge.
Wow.
So this is something that they have to do, is to also encourage not only families to have children, but encourage immigration.
Yeah.
To have more talent coming from India, for example, where and people can come to school in Taiwan, get an advanced education, and then remain there and contribute to their economy. So I think they have some very good plans, but it will still be a challenge.
We are in decline in terms of population very rapidly. Every year we lose 100,000 people. It's just one city vanishing every year in Japan. So maybe we are in competition in having the talented Indians, people. Yeah, well, thank you very much. To run the parliament for Mr. Lai, he has to align with either Kuomintang or other People's Party, because he has no majority, right? But even Kuomintang does not have a majority, and People's Party have casting votes. So how to get their favor tactically is very important for Mr. Lai. Can he do that?
Well, I think that there is no solid coalition between the Taiwan People's Party, Ko Wen-je's party, and the KMT. Ko Wen-je is very opportunistic. He just wants to increase his own party strength and his own position, because he wants to run for president again in 4 years.
Oh, I see.
And so when I met him last week, one of the things that he said was that he will see what the issues are that the ruling party and the KMT disagree about, and then decide how his party will move, which side they will support.
I see.
The TPP doesn't really have a very strong ideology. They just want to take advantage of opportunities.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting that just 2 days ago, President Tsai Ing-wen met with Ko Wen-je.
Oh, really?
And this is unusual in Taiwan for a president to reach out across the aisle, and it was reported publicly that they met. But I think that this is a smart move, because the DPP has to work with Ko Wen-je's party going forward. So I think this will be issue dependent. There will be some issues that the TPP will want to work with the KMT, and others, they will work with the ruling party.
Great. That's the sort of maturization of the Taiwan democracy.
I hope so.
We had the socialist LDP was crashing against each other. In 1990s, the many sorts of coalitions born and dead. That I hope this would work well. Can I now talk about the China, continental China? It seems to me that Xi Jinping's government is now becoming stronger in terms of security, internal security, but in terms of economy, maybe he's failing China. And what would be China like in 10 years' time, in 2032, after fourth term of Xi Jinping? Xi is now, it seems to me that his policy or his government is too much of personal dictatorship, and efficiency is now being lost in China as a government. And this is not very good for China, but the people are maybe frustrated, but under strong surveillance electronically. They can't say anything, but the frustration is maybe mounting among people. And he is now facing a very difficult time to run the government. And what you take, Bonnie?
Well, I very much agree. I think that Xi Jinping has taken his country from one-party rule to one-man rule. And this is very dangerous for China. He is not, I think, getting good advice from people around him. He doesn't look for people to challenge him. And the possibility of him making more decisions in the future that are really not in China's interests, I think, is really growing. So we have seen that he has emphasized party control and national security over economic growth. And this is not in China's interests. So I think very few people believe that China really grew at just over 5% last year. At the just completed 2 sessions, they said that next year they will grow the target, and we know they always say they grow at the exact same number that they estimate they will, and they say it will be around 5% again. Most economists that I know think that China is perhaps growing at maybe 3%. Of course, there's different estimates, but most predict that the trend will be downward, that there are persistent problems. There's high youth unemployment. There's still the holdover of the real estate bubble and local debt. There's declining productivity and, of course, a shrinking labor force due to these demographic challenges. And Xi Jinping is not taking measures that would be aimed at solving these issues. And he is ideologically opposed to encouraging consumers to spend more money. So the consumers are not being given perhaps some incentives to spend more money, which is what we would do in more sort of capitalized countries. And so I think he's making the wrong economic decisions for his country. And one thing that's very interesting to me, before the COVID period in China, there was a lot of fear of Xi Jinping. People were unwilling to criticize him. But after the COVID lockdowns, when those ended, people were angry. And so people began to criticize him. And first it was just about how he handled COVID. But now it's about how he's handled the economy and some of his foreign policy issues, like relations with Russia. There's a little bit of grumbling about that. And people at the beginning just called him, the boss, didn't do things well. But now they're increasingly criticizing him by name. And
that's
so there is social social dissatisfaction that's growing.
After, just before the lockdown is lifted, people came here with a big mask here, sunglasses, deep hats here, white paper, Xi Jinping should leave. This is very shocking for the Chinese leaders. And now my colleagues who go to China, they say, even taxi driver says she should leave. This is amazing in China. But the frustrations are coming. This is no longer Chinese in Mao's time. And Xi Jinping's technique for governing the nation is brainwash, read my books, just repeat what I say. And they are Chinese, today Chinese are totally different Chinese. They have their own opinion. They don't simply say that. And they are very much frustrated. And they know how Americans, Japanese are living in their lives. The many students are here in the States, right? They do not want to go back to China.
And capital is leaving the country, and people want their children to go abroad, not just to get an education and come home, but to stay, to build their lives abroad. So China will lose talent, it will lose money. FDI into China was negative for the first time last year. Very bad signs.
But the Xi Jinping does not understand this. Maybe he had a very harsh time when he was a kid. His father was ousted from the party once after he offended Mao Zedong, right? And he was ousted. And then it was a time of the great deep and cultural revolution time, and he was alone in the rural part. He had to show that he's a very good boy, a communist boy, right? That means he unlike Li Keqiang, he could not touch the Western civilization. And what he thinks is, that reminds me of our imperial time, right? Cut off from the Western world, have the autonomy here in our own sphere of influence, and the autonomy as an economic entity, right? And the result is being cut off from the Western big market and impoverishment of our economy. And this is exactly what he's doing. This is not for securing his own country. Being connected with the Western big markets, free exchange of the people, money, information, right? This guarantees a growth. When China is cut off from a big market, China is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller. It seems to me that this is where Xi Jinping is headed for it. And Chinese very often says they will never repeat the Japanese mistake again. Seems to me they're exactly repeating the same mistake.
They often also say they should not repeat the mistakes of the Soviet Union. There's nobody that Xi Jinping hated more than Gorbachev.
Anyway, is this, in your opinion, would this sort of the future instability or future decline of China increase the risk of Taiwan contingency or not? What's your take?
I think that's a very important question. I think that in the near term, it is unlikely that Xi Jinping is going to use dissatisfaction at home to justify using force against Taiwan. He may want to be adventurous, put more pressure against Taiwan, the Philippines, Japan, maybe to distract the domestic population. But actually using force, I'm skeptical, because it will probably weaken the Chinese economy more. Using force means that there will be soldiers who are only sons who will die. If he tried to take Taiwan and did not have the military capability to do so, and he failed, that could put at risk his own position and the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party.
That's right.
So I think it's much too risky. So I do think he could be more adventurous. I think we're going to see a lot more pressure used in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, around the Senkakus. But actually using force, I don't think so. Not until he is confident that he has the military capability to achieve a military and political goal.
I fully agree. The big contingency is too risky for him. But he had to show that he's a great leader, strong. I can bully even Japanese. I can be a match of the American, peer of the Americans. He has to show that. He's doing this even today in gray zones. But having a big war against the big ones, this is against Sun Tzu.
Yes, it is against Sun Tzu.
And they never, Sun Tzu says, just fight a war that you can win. That's Sun Tzu. And Xi Jinping will not do the stupid things. But we have to tell them that he can be much better with us. That's what we're saying all the time. Japan, even after Tiananmen, we said to the Westerners, don't sanction China. It's only Japan who said that. We can't kick back Deng Xiaoping in the time of Mao. We can't do that. We stood with them. We could be too kind to them. But Xi is going the opposite direction that China should go. He's failing China, but maybe we can't take them back. Meantime, so we have to deter Chinese aggression over Taiwan, and sending message to them that they can be much better with us. Why are you leaving us? The world is now changing. Japan, US, and G7 nations occupied 80–90% of world GDP last century. We're now less than 50%. Young leaders are coming up, like China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Turkey, and everybody else, right? South Africa. China is leading this second team.
Yes,
they're
leading the global South.
Yeah, big train of global South. But suddenly they changed the directions and coming against us. It's a big mistake. But as far as China is challenging us, we have to show them that you are much better with us. But if you challenge us, we have to cope with it. As far as we're united, China can twist arms of, say, Taiwan, Japan, even European nations like Britain and France, because we have to fight beyond the weight. But when the West is united, the weight is twice as big as China. So we can still set the course of the humanity, and China can change that. And they have to know it. But it seems to me that after Lehman shock, they became Japanese 1930s. Overconfidence.
I think the one thing in the Biden administration's policies, which is a real shift from the prior Trump administration, is the emphasis on strengthening our alliances, our partnerships, and our coalitions, and to strengthen our ability to defend democracies and our supply chains. And the Chinese object to this so strongly and so frequently that it assures me we are on the right path. They do not like this trend. There's nothing the Chinese, I think, fear more than other countries working together. And one very good example, of course, is the US, Japan, and South Korea. This was something that Xi Jinping wanted to avoid, but he has been unable to. And the AUKUS arrangement is another example that I think the Chinese did not anticipate. But it is China's behavior, especially towards its neighbors, but really even beyond its neighborhood, that has led countries to want to work together to protect themselves, and
That's
especially their democracies.
Yes, yes. Just like a zebra in front of a lion.
Yeah.
They get together if lion
Yes.
comes in. And this is what's going on. China doesn't understand it. And the problem of American diplomacy or American even domestic politics is based upon people's consent of the free will. That's the most important principle of the Americans, right? This is somehow contractual. You agree? If you agree, you keep your words with this together. That's how Americans made the nation, the superpower, by building consensus, making deals. No big wars like in Japan, Hideyoshi or Ieyasu, you don't have that, right? No sword, but discussions, making deals. China doesn't understand that. They believe that stronger nations can twist the arm of the weak ones. And that's them. This is absolutely counterproductive because they don't like the bullying guys like this.
Countries don't want to be bullied.
Yeah, and even for Taiwan, they slap faces of Taiwan, sending the warships and sending the fighters, bombers, and they give money to the sympathetic people in Taiwan. And Taiwanese people say, "Excuse me, sir, do you love me or hate me?" And they like less and less China, and in particular after Hong Kong, Taiwanese people's heart left China, because that's future of ours. Excuse me, we can never accept it. And they don't understand that. They use force, and people obey. That's inside of China, but outside China, they don't obey. So maybe I should go to the last part of this dialogue. That's U.S. policy towards Taiwan and China. I think now things are more and more difficult. One, China has become very big. 10 years ago, when I was working for Prime Minister Abe, China was our size. We didn't fear them. US is far bigger than China. Japan-US alliance was far stronger than China, so we didn't fear them. But now China is 4 times bigger than Japan. Amazing, isn't it? It's almost 80% of United States, and the things changed a lot. Before when Li Danghui democratized the Taiwan Islands, China shot missiles, 2 carriers came in, and they backed off in this way. Now they say, bring on me. A2AD. And things are changing militarily. And we have to keep peace and stability of the region, the strait. That's the Japan-US policy for half a century. In 1960, when we revised the security treaty, we gave Americans the right to use Japanese bases to defend Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines. So their security is connected to ours. 1999, Obuchi-san, Prime Minister, then said to the President Clinton, we can help you in the war, say in Korea, Taiwan, surrounding Japan, or even only in the logistics. 2015, Prime Minister Abe said, this is not deterrence. Transportation is not deterrence, he said. We should say we can be with the United States from the beginning in the war. And then, but we didn't have money and assets for the military, so Kishida-san said we should double the military budget. And this is where we are. So we are standing with the Americans. The single purpose is to keep peace, stability in the region. And this is where we are. And on Taiwanese side, things are changing too. After democratization, the voice of the indigenous Taiwanese people, its minorities in the mountains, and Chinese who came from the continents, they lived the totally different history of 100 years. And their voice is coming up. And they are now going through a very narrow path. It's not independence, but it can never be annexation. And they are now merging into one, the Kuomintang and the indigenous Taiwanese people, and they have to go through a very narrow path. And we have to help them. Don't invite a war. Don't shout independence. But we can keep the status quo as it is. That was our policy for it.
Well, this is really the new consensus in Taiwan, really among everyone, is to preserve the status quo and to preserve their freedoms and democracy and to make Taiwan more resilient. The differences are over how to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yes,
the DPP will have one set of ideas to diversify away from China, to strengthen ties with the United States, Japan, and other countries, and not necessarily to talk to China unless China wants to talk with no preconditions. And certainly President Tsai Ing-wen and also President-elect Lai Ching-te has been willing to have dialogue and communication with China. But it is Beijing's side that has not agreed to do that. And so this is really a consensus now in Taiwan. The Kuomintang, also the Taiwan People's Party, they want to have more cooperation with China. They think that more dialogue is beneficial for preserving the status quo. But there are doubts in Taiwan because Ma Ying-jeou tried to do this for 8 years. And we ended up with the Sunflower Movement, young people taking over the legislature because they did not want to see Taiwan become so economically integrated with China.
That's right.
And I don't think that people want to go back to this. So as you say, there is this new sense of Taiwanese identity that is separate from China. Nobody in Taiwan, or you could count probably on one hand the people who really want Taiwan to be absorbed by China, not under Xi Jinping. For people who say Taiwan and China are part of one country, they say this is the Republic of China. And someday we will take China back. There are still probably some people who hold that view.
Yeah, so it's a bit minority these days.
Very
senior people.
And there are people who are very elderly.
Yeah, it seems to me that for China could not produce an identity, communist Chinese. They failed to do so. That's the reason why they are saying Han nationalism. Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, we are not Han's excuses. We are living in the field, riding horses. That's them. Cultivating rice is not their life. And we are not Chinese. That's the big problem. Is Mao's China is Qing dynasty. So many ethnic minorities are there, and they are now breaking out, and very heavy assimilation efforts are being done by Beijing. But they are vast territory, but small population. It's millions of people, right? Taiwan, 23 millions. If they say we are Taiwanese, bye-bye, China will break up. So China can never allow Taiwanese new identity. And this is some new tense here. This is not a warfare, but this is a psychological warfare, sort of. And China feels they must win. And the Taiwanese will never surrender. This is the difficulties for the Japan-US alliance. We are supporting status quo, right? We don't want to invite a war there, but the psychologically reality is now changing. How to adapt ourselves to new identity. We can never fight a war without reasons. But we can never encourage the raising tension there. And this is a very narrow path. But we have to coordinate the Americans and Japanese and possibly Koreans, hopefully Australians and the Filipinos. We have to understand each other.
There are elements of China's approach in this psychological warfare toward Taiwan that worry me very much. During the election campaign, there were many forms of misinformation and disinformation to people in Taiwan, telling them the United States will never be your partner, they will never defend you. Look at Ukraine, the United States didn't put troops on the ground, so don't expect that they will defend you. Essentially using this disinformation to induce despair that the people in Taiwan really have no future, that the DPP won't govern well, and so ultimately they should just surrender. They should become part of China. And even though I don't think that most people in Taiwan believe this, nonetheless, it sows differences among the parties and between young people and old people. They try to sow chaos, and I worry about this kind of messaging in Taiwan. So I think our countries need to do more to give Taiwan confidence in itself, in its governance system. I think we all need to have more economic and trade agreements and cooperation with Taiwan. We need to try to let the world know what China is doing at the United Nations, which is to distort the meaning of the UN General Assembly Resolution 2758 in 1971, when China, PRC took the China seat in the UN, and they have been trying to tell the world this meant that every single member of the UN has embraced the One China principle, so Taiwan must be part of China. And we don't push back enough against these things.
That's right. We have to start a new strategic communications. That resolution was about the seat, not about the islands.
Exactly. Very simple. That's exactly right.
Yes. At that time, the 1972 Shanghai Communique written by Kissinger, and after signing that, Chu and I met our Prime Minister Kakue Tanaka, and Chu and I said, Kissinger is a genius. Both the Chinese of both sides of the strait said there's one China. That means Mao and Chiang Kai-shek said there's one China, both of them. It's different China. It's Communist China and the Republic of China, but this is one China. So Americans don't complain about that. That was Shanghai Communique. Doesn't mean there are two Chinas. But representative is now Beijing, no longer Taipei, but don't attack Taiwan. That was the consensus. Chu Enlai said to Tanaka at that time, archive is fully open for us. He said, we don't invade Taiwan, he said. This was the consensus among the three, right? Tokyo, Washington, and Beijing, and even Taiwan. And they can't change the status quo. And now China is saying, the island is mine, people belong to me. It's 19th century, we can never accept that. But we have to show very skillfully and quietly that they can't start a war that's devastating for everybody, not only for Japanese and Taiwanese and Philippines, but it's devastating for Chinese and Americans. That would disrupt the world economy. The biggest economy, United States, number 2, China, number 3, us, number 21, Taiwan, fight against each other. Somehow Korea could be there, Australia. That would disrupt the world economy. They can't do that. And that would have very bad impact upon China.
Yes.
And they have to understand that. We don't push Taiwan over, say, status quo to independence. We don't do that. We stick to the agreements of 1970s. We did the same thing. Don't attack Taiwan. Now Beijing is representative of China. One China, that's fine. This is the status quo. So don't change it. And of course, things are changing. Taiwan's new identity is coming in. Xi Jinping is more and more regressive. Of course, things are changing. But it is our responsibility to keep the status quo. How about the ambiguity policy for you, Bonnie?
Well, we can talk about that. Let me just say a few things about U.S. policy first. You know that the United States articulated a policy toward China of invest, align, and compete. And I think that continues to guide the Biden administration. Invest in America, align with our allies, strengthen ourselves so that we can more effectively compete with China. So great focus on technology. It's interesting, technology is a central part of US policy. It's also a central part of Xi Jinping's policy because he wants to use technology to gain more military advantage and to try to drive economic growth. So we are having this intense technological competition. And as we have this competition, which is strategic competition, and it's because of the structural competition between the United States and China, our interests really, in my view, no longer align with China's on most issues. Maybe we have interests in combating global warming, but even issues on like North Korea, where we may have had some overlapping interests in the past, I think we really don't today. And so therefore we really have to ensure that we can effectively compete with China, but we will not get this let this competition get out of control. And the Biden administration is trying to manage the risk so that competition doesn't end up leading to military conflict. And so when our presidents met, Xi Jinping and Biden, in the margins of the San Francisco before the APEC summit, it was, I think, clear that both leaders, for different reasons, want to stabilize this relationship. The United States wants to have some good communication channels with China. We have to keep talking to Xi Jinping because he's the only decider.
Yes.
But we also want to have some channels and conversations with people who are in their system and with the military. So we're trying to revive the military dialogue and have some interaction. And to me, the jury is still out as to whether this will really work as a strategy. But this is what President Biden wants now. He has to deal with Ukraine. He has to deal with the war in the Middle East. And so he wants to ensure that Xi Jinping doesn't use force against Taiwan, and he wants to buy time. And as he's focusing on getting reelected, Xi Jinping also wants to buy time for his own reasons. So much corruption in the military. He knows his military is not ready to take over Taiwan. So when it comes to keeping peace in the Taiwan Strait, one aspect is to ensure that Taiwan has more capability to defend itself. This is a work in progress. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's very important because they can not only rely on us to come rescue them. And then, of course, we have to strengthen our ability to defend Taiwan. This includes our adjustment of our force posture in the region, which is ongoing, and we are working on with Japan and also, of course, with the Philippines. But the question that you asked about, strategic ambiguity, has this outlived its usefulness, which some people believe, but I do not. Because I believe that if we were to change our rhetoric and give Taiwan an ironclad commitment to its defense, then the Chinese might conclude that we are completely abandoning our understanding that we achieved in normalization. In 1979, we abrogated our defense treaty with Taiwan. We used to have a mutual defense treaty, and we had a commitment to defend them. But we should not signal that we are going to return to that and lead them potentially. Xi Jinping could conclude his worst fears are already being realized and might provoke the attack that we seek to deter. And so I believe the important thing is to build the capability, ensure we can defend Taiwan. But I'm not convinced that changing the rhetoric is necessary, and the most dangerous thing is to change the rhetoric when we don't yet have the capability.
I fully agree that we should show that the militarily and quietly we are catching up with the military build-up, and you can't start a war, and you can be finally defeated. We should show that quietly. It's not necessary to say it. That show our capabilities enough. Militaries are watching each other very closely every day, and we should do this. Should do this. My fear is dictators are not like us, not like our governments. They didn't. They are. I think information is limited. Only good news reaches their ears, and they might make a big mistake. Isn't it possible that our very prudent, calculated diplomacy is taken as a weakness of ours by Xi Jinping? That's my fear. Putin made a big mistake, thinking that the West will not move. In Crimea in 2014, diplomacy failed, and militarily Putin won, and he took what he wanted. And he thought he can do this twice again, but this time he can't do that. But he made a big mistake, because the West will not move. West is weak in this array, and sometimes Mr. Biden says sometimes I might intervene. I might intervene. And people say it's a blunder. I think it's a calculated blunder. And sometimes it's necessary
It's calculated
to
in part because of domestic politics in the United States.
The Congress.
He wants to protect his flank so that he isn't criticized by more conservative Republicans.
Yes.
So I think that is true.
Oh,
but he may also want to signal Taiwan to have more confidence and signal Xi Jinping not to use force.
I have a question, and this is my surprise, my pleasant surprise. Before, Taiwanese friends were the senior conservative Republicans. Now we have Madam Pelosi, and Democrats are very excited to defend Taiwan. And all my friends in Washington says, Kanehara-san, okay, don't follow Congress, follow White House. They are very encouraging, but they are inviting risk. That's the sort of the very much sort of prudent Americans advise me. What do you think of American Congress today about Taiwan, their Taiwan policy?
I think that there is bipartisan support for Taiwan, not always for the right reasons. Some people want to defend Taiwan just because it has the most advanced semiconductor capability.
Yes, TSMC.
And
right.
some people advocate that we get that capability out of Taiwan because it's too vulnerable.
Yes.
I think that's a mistake. I think that is a very negative message to be sending to Taiwan.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that they have worked very hard to build the position that they have today. And Taiwan produces 92% of the most advanced chips in the world, and that will continue going forward. And so I don't think that it's great that Japan now has a fab from TSMC. We are going to open ours in Arizona, I hope soon.
The Germans are thinking the same thing.
The Germans will probably produce the legacy chips, primarily for automobiles.
In Kumamoto, we are producing legacy chips.
And you are producing larger chips as well. The most advanced capabilities, the 2 nanometer chips, will only be produced in Taiwan.
Yeah, that's right.
In Tainan. And going forward, they will produce even smaller chips. And then I think there are maybe some other people in Congress who think about maybe using Taiwan more as a weapon. This is similar to how Trump, I think, taught about in Taiwan, and I don't think that that's good for Taiwan either. So I think there are congressmen who want to support Taiwan because it is a democracy. Because its people have the right to live as they want, to not be part of China if they do not want to.
Right.
And also because the United States' position of leadership in the region and around the world would be at stake if we did not support Taiwan. And I'm troubled by those people in Congress who do not see the linkage between Ukraine and Taiwan. And President Tsai Ing-wen talks about this all the time. She's very concerned. If the United States does not support Ukraine, then how can she tell her people, give them confidence that if someday China is attacks Taiwan, that the United States would help to defend Taiwan. This is a linkage that really makes sense, and we do not want to undermine the confidence of the people.
We feel the same way. During the Cold War, we are seeing backs of the Soviets here, but China is with us, and NATO had a big claws to grab the bear's heads in European part. Americans are ready to shoot thousands of nuclear missiles over the Arctic Sea, so we didn't fear Russians very much. Russia is in the cage. That was our thinking. China has now risen very big, far stronger than Russia. It's a dragon, and we're facing that dragon's face here. Smell is not very good, but the tail is very short. Europeans don't care. So this is where we are. That's the reason why we are saying this. The Western world, the liberal world, is on a global scale. There are challengers like Russians and Chinese, but they are very strong, and the West is shrinking. The global South is standing up. So we have to cooperate to keep this system alive and persuade the global South people you should be big, prosperous, and respected inside the system. Don't shake this from outside. This is what Putin and Xi Jinping is doing today. So we should be in cooperation. And that's the reason why Kishida-san was among the first leaders who condemned Putin. It's a big change from Abe's line, so
Yes.
Putin must have been shocked.
Right.
And then we are now among the biggest 3 or 4 the donors to Ukraine. We are not giving money. We are buying our future together with Ukrainians.
Right.
And many Ukrainians are here too. Of course, we invested a lot in Ukraine. There are many good engineers. They moved to Japan. They are now living in Japan as refugees. And now we have to show solidarity. And I believe that it's a good message for Taiwanese too. The Westerners can get together. Then we can manage the world crisis like this. So don't worry. We should be with you. That's the message to Taiwanese and to Japanese too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Bonnie. I believe that this discussion will be very much loved by many Japanese here, and they would learn a lot from your expertise and from your deep insights into China and Taiwan. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always wonderful to exchange views with you.
Thank you.